Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to be looking at factoring quadratic equations in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. To help introduce this topic, I want to take a look at this example here. So, let's say we were asked to expand 2x plus 1 times 3x plus 5. To do this, we need to multiply all the terms inside the first bracket by all the terms inside the second bracket. So this 2x here, I'm going to need to multiply by all the terms inside the second bracket. So let's do that. 2x times 3x. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. 2x times 5. 2x times 5 is 10x. Now, we're going to need to multiply the 1 here by all the terms inside the second bracket. 1 times 3x is 3x. And 1 times 5 is 5. And we can simplify this some more, right? Because here, 10x plus 3x gives me 13x. Now, you might notice some things by looking at what we did here. So first thing you might notice is my two middle numbers here, the 10 and the 3, they add up to give me 13 here. So that's one thing you might notice. Something else you might notice is these two numbers, the 10 and the 3, they multiply to give me this number times this number. Now, this is an idea that we can use when we're asked to factor quadratic equations in this form, right? Because if we can find two numbers that add to the number in front of x in the middle here, and that multiply to this number times this number, then we can use these two numbers to split this middle term up. Right? So that's the idea. Right? When we're asked to factor quadratic equations in this form, we need two numbers that add to my number in front of x, my b value, and then multiply to a times c. Let's take a look at a few examples here. So this first one, we're asked to factor 4x squared plus 9x plus 2. Well, what do we need to do? We need to find two numbers that add to my middle number in front of x here. So, I'm going to need two numbers that add to give me 9. Also, I'm going to need two numbers that multiply to give me this number here times this number. 4 times 2 is 8. So, let's try some numbers out and see if we can find one that works. So, for example, I could try out 1 times 8. So let's try that out. 1 times 8. Well, 1 times 8 is 8. And also, 1 plus 8 is 9. So these two numbers work. And now what I can do is I can use these two numbers to split up my middle term here. Right? So I can rewrite this equation as 4x squared plus 1x plus 8x plus 2. Notice, we're splitting up the 9x here up into 1x plus 8x, right? The two numbers we found here. And now, to factor this, we can just factor by grouping. And if you're not familiar with factoring by grouping, I'll put a link in the description with a video going over this topic. So I would encourage you to go to look at that video if you're not familiar with factoring by grouping. Okay, let's continue here. So to factor by grouping, I'm going to need to common factor my first two terms here. Okay, if I common factor my first two terms, well, I notice there's an x in common to both of these, right? There's an x in common to both 4x squared and 1x. So I can common factor out an x. Now I just need to figure out what I need to multiply x by to get 4x squared plus 1x. X times 4x gives me 4x squared. And x times 1 gives me 1x. So there we go. I common factored out my first two terms here. In factoring by grouping, I'm also going to want to common factor my next two terms here, the 8x plus 2. And now I'll notice 2 goes into both 8x and 2, so I can common factor out a 2. And then in brackets, I just need to think about what I need to multiply 2 by to get 8x plus 2. Well, 2 times 4x is 8x. And 2 times 1 is 2. And now you'll notice we have a 4x plus 1 in common in both of these brackets here. So I can common factor out a 4x plus 1. And then beside that, I'm just going to put my x and the positive 2 here. Right? Because that's what I'm multiplying the 4x plus 1 by here. We're multiplying 4x plus 1 by x and by 2. And that's my final answer. So again, what's the idea here? We need two numbers that multiply to the number in front of x. That add to my number in front of x. And then multiply to this number times this number. Let's take a look at another example. 3x squared plus 10x minus 8. So for this example, same idea as before. We need two numbers that add to my number in front of x. So I need two numbers that add to 10. Also, I need two numbers that multiply to this number times this number. 3 times negative 8, that gives me negative 24. And now, I can try different numbers out to see if I can find one that works. So for example, I want to think about, okay, what two numbers multiply to give me negative 24? Well, I could try 8 times negative 3, right? So let's try that. 8 times negative 3 multiplies to give me negative 24, but these do not add to give me 10. So that does not work. And we need to try something else. Let's try 12 times negative 2 and see if that works. Well, 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. And also, 12 plus negative 2, 12 minus 2 is 10. So this works. And now what I can do is I can use my two numbers here to split up my 10x. Okay, so 10x, that's the same thing as 12x minus 2x. And now I have a minus 8 here at the end. Right, so just to show you what I did, I split up the middle number, the middle term, the 10x, up into 12x minus 2x. And now to factor this out, we can just use factoring by grouping. So I'm going to start by common factoring my first two terms. So we need to think about what goes into both 3x squared and 12x. Well, 3x goes into both 3x squared and 12x. 3x times x gives me 3x squared. And 3x times 4 gives me 12x. I'm going to do the same thing for my last two terms here. I'm just going to common factor this out. So I need to think about, again, what goes into both negative 2x and negative 8? Well, negative 2 goes into both negative 2x and negative 8. So I can common factor out a negative 2. Negative 2 times x gives me negative 2x. So I'll put an x inside my brackets. Negative 2 times positive 4 gives me negative 8. So I'll put a positive 4 inside my brackets. And now what I'll notice is I have an x plus 4 in common here. So I can common factor out an x plus 4. And then beside that in brackets, I'm going to put the 3x minus 2. Because that's what I'm multiplying the x plus 4 by. And there we go. That's my answer. Let's take a look at one more example, just to make sure we're getting this. So, 5x squared minus 13x minus 6. Again, what do we need to do? We need two numbers that add to give me the number in front of x. So, I need two numbers that add to give me negative 13. Also, I need two numbers that multiply to give me 5 times negative 6. Five times negative 6 is negative 30. So again, I'm going to try different numbers out to see if I can find two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to negative 13. Well, for example, I could try negative 6 times 5. Negative 6 times 5 multiplies to give me negative 30, but it does not add to give me negative 13. So that's not going to work. So we need to try something else. What about negative 15 times 2? Let's try that. Negative 15 times 2 multiplies to give me negative 30, and it also adds to give me negative 13. So that works. And I can use these two numbers now to split up my middle term here. So I'm going to use the negative 15 and the 2 to split up my negative 13x. And then at the end we have a minus 6. And now to factor this, again, we're just going to use factoring by grouping. So we're going to start by common factoring out the first two terms. Well, there's a 5x in common to both 5x squared and 15x. So I can common factor out a 5x. 5x times x gives me 5x squared. Also, 5x times negative 3 gives me negative 15x. So there we go. I common factored out the first two terms. I'm also going to common factor out my last two terms. And I know a 2 is in common to both 2x and 6. So I can common factor out a 2. 2 times x gives me 2x. And 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 6. I have an x minus 3 in common here, so I can common factor that out. And now in brackets beside that, I'm multiplying by my x minus 3 by 5x and by positive 2. So there's my final answer. So the idea when we're factoring quadratic equations in this form is we need two numbers that add to my middle number in front of x and that multiply to this number times this number. Once I've found two numbers that work, I can use these two numbers to split up my middle term here.